Pokémon Scarlet and Violet have been out for a few weeks now, so it's time to discuss spoilers. I was absolutely floored by the late game stuff and feel it has to be talked about. Needless to say, this is a spoiler-filled video, so if you'd like to see a spoiler-free review, please check out this video first. In this video, I'll be talking about the game's ending, the new Paradox and Legendary Pokémon, as well as my predictions for the inevitable DLC and next game in the series. So with that out of the way, let's jump right into it. This was undoubtedly the best moment in the game, and perhaps one of, if not the most memorable moment in the entire series. Once you go into the crater and start exploring Area Zero, Scarlet and Violet becomes a completely different game altogether. Bringing in the three supporting characters from the different story arcs was an inspired decision, and seeing them banter and get to know each other as you explore an exciting new area made the game feel less like Pokémon and more like a standard JRPG. It actually reminded me a lot of Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, or Xenoblade. You're now a party of characters on a quest together rather than just a kid exploring on his own. Giving the area this weird and haunting music really contributed to that feeling of being in another game, and really underscored the change in style and tone. The Paradox Pokémon that inhabit the area have non-Pokémon sounding names, like Screamtail, Great Tusk, and Roaring Moon, and those names sound more like generic enemies you'd find in a game like Xenoblade. The disappointing lack of voice acting in this section means it's not quite a home run, but this idea of having a party of characters that explore and banter together, as well as taking inspiration from other JRPGs, was an inspired and groundbreaking decision. I wonder if this is experimentation for the future of the series. I love that after Arceus and now Scarlet and Violet, the Pokémon series is finally experimenting with its approach to storytelling. I'm all for a new game in the series taking inspiration from other JRPGs, and I love the idea of setting off on an adventure with a party of characters rather than just a solo protagonist. As for the final boss against the dead professor, wow, that was weird. I'm actually shocked that Pokémon would kill off a professor like this, especially in a game that's played by a lot of kids. Even weirder was the decision to have them reborn as an AI-controlled robot, which was creepy as hell. I wonder how the game's target audience of small children would react to this. It's bizarre and shocking that Pokémon would explore the theme of death and rebirth. Still, it's another example of Game Freak experimenting with new themes and ideas. While this part didn't entirely work for me, the fact that they're experimenting so much bodes well for the future of the series. That final boss fight in the middle of the Crystal Time Machine chamber, despite the janky graphics, is still another memorable moment for the series. And coming off the back of that exploration into the crater, it's possibly the best Pokémon storytelling has ever been. I really hope for more of this in the future. While that first impression of this huge final area filled with strong Pokémon was powerful, after getting through it the first time, it reveals a lot of problems. While it was fun to go back and explore on your rideable Pokémon and catch the new Paradox Pokémon, that increased explorability made it feel smaller and emptier. While there are a few secrets hidden here and there, like the cave in which you find the Roaring Moon or the Iron Valiant, or the mysterious plaque in the Crystal Chamber, there aren't nearly enough to make it rewarding, especially as there is no major reveal or world building here, but I suspect this might be resolved with DLC. And I'll get into that later. It's not nearly enough, as you'll catch the Paradox Pokémon as well as the extra Koraidon or Miraidon, but that's it. There's not much variation in topography or landmarks, so despite being a big area, it all feels a little bit generic. I feel like there could have been brand new, never before seen powerful Pokémon hiding here in this final area. Also, the lack of a new legendary Pokémon here is similarly disappointing, as it breaks the series' tradition of legendaries hiding in late game areas. Still, that legendary could possibly exist as DLC, but I'll get into that later. It's my belief that DLC should be entirely optional and extra, and not exist to resolve unresolved clues or plot points, which is why I found Area Zero initially exciting, but ultimately disappointing. Man, these are some weird little guys. Obviously, that's the point of supposedly ancient or future Pokémon, as well as matching the forbidden nature of Area Zero, but I can't say I'm a huge fan of the designs. They look a bit like fan Pokémon from a modded Pokémon game, especially that Magneton one. Additionally, I initially thought those names were placeholders, like when Sun and Moon's Ultra Beasts were first revealed. You might remember they went by code names like UB01 and such. I thought after the final battle their names might display as Jigglypuff or Misdreavus or whatever, but nope. Those are their canonical names. It made a bit more sense to me later when I realized they were trying to evoke more traditional JRPGs for the ending of the game, but I still don't like them, and those names add to that feeling of them being fan-made Pokemon. But this idea of fan Pokemon leads me to my theory about the Paradox Pokemon. Bear with me here. I don't think these are truly Pokemon from the ancient future or the distant past, but something else entirely. I don't think those professors went into the past or future, but into an alternate dimension, a virtual reality, or a dreamscape. Allow me to explain. If you go to the school library and read the description of Slitherwing, one of the Paradox Paradox Pokémon, it says it resembles Volcarona, but no fossils of it have ever been found in Paldea. So we have these Pokémon that are supposedly from an ancient past, but no evidence of them ever having existed can be found. Furthermore, a Pokémon like Magneton having modern day magnets and screws as components, existing millions of years in the past before humans, doesn't sit right, does it? I feel like choosing Magneton was a deliberate decision here. I think further clues exist in the titular Scarlet and Violet books. We're led to believe that this is the journal of the expedition leader Heath, who went into the crater decades before the game is set. It talks of him seeing these Paradox Pokémon, as well as him drawing strange diagrams while blacked out. There's also a drawing of a Paradox Suicune or Virizion, which does not exist and is said to be drawn by an expedition team member with an overactive imagination. The partially redacted page talks about an unseen hexagonal disc-shaped Pokémon that's also not seen in the game. Heath also went into the crater with a Cyclozar. It says he penned the Scarlet or Violet book after coming back from the crater. However, I think this book is primarily a work of fiction brought to life. Whatever is the cause of the crystal formations and magical energy in the crater is this unseen disc-shaped legendary Pokemon. I think it's the one page of the book that holds some truth to it, as Arvin tells you in the game, is redacted in all copies of the book. I think whatever this Pokemon is, or whatever the truth of Area Zero is what created the Paradox Pokemon. The Paradox Pokemon are not from the past or future, but the expedition teams or Heath's imaginary Pokemon brought to life, existing in an alternate dimension or magical space, which explains why they resemble fan Pokemon, have weird names, and why no fossils of them can be found. The Paradox Suicune or Virizion could show up in this game's inevitable DLC, confirming this theory. I also think Heath's affection for Cyclozar is what corrupted and transformed it into Koraidon or Miraidon. It's no coincidence Cyclozar is in this book. Having a legendary Pokemon bringing literal legends to life matches the overarching theme of this game, with a giant library being a key location in the story, as well as the MacGuffin of the legendary book that gives this game its name. Additionally, alternate dimensions and multiversal travel are at the forefront of popular culture these days, as we've seen in recent media like Rick and Morty, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Everything Everywhere All at Once, and Bayonetta 3. Why wouldn't Game Freak take inspiration from this? They've always taken inspiration from popular culture. This game even has a superhero Pokemon. To sum this long-winded theory up, I believe that the Paradox Pokemon are not from the past or future, but something else entirely. Whether from an alternate universe or fictional Pokemon created by a legendary Pokemon, or of some other wacky origin, something weird has gone on in Area Zero. This is why they're labeled Paradox Pokemon, not ancient or future Pokemon. It's a potential candidate for DLC, and I'll circle back to this theory later. In terms of concept, I love these guys. In terms of design, I hate them and they're a disappointment. The concept is great. 4 treasures from another region brought into Paldea and corrupted by human greed and ambition. It's a simple concept and it builds out the world. We now know that there's a region east of Paldea, which isn't surprising considering the eastern edge of the map is cut off by mountains. Some more context to the Treasures of Ruin is given if you pursue the history teacher's storyline in the optional school part of the game, which explains why they had to be sealed away. This builds the history of Paldea and makes the region feel more lived in, knowing that there's this weird moment in its history. Design-wise, I think they're horrible. They all have weird eyes, and Wodal, the one based on the wooden tablet, is just hideous, with its color scheme and its weird two-dimensional eyes, and Chien-Pao with its asymmetrical sword teeth looking like straight-up nightmare fuel. I think they could have looked cooler, rather than just weird. Perhaps other people will like them, but they're just not for me. Considering the theming and design based on wooden tablets, jade beads, a sword, and a drinking vessel, it seems these are heavily influenced by Chinese culture. And as this region is specifically said to be east of Paldea, and with the appearance of a geographically and culturally incongruous bamboo grove area in the Spanish-themed Paldea close to the eastern edge of its map, I can only infer that this region to the east is an Asian or Chinese-inspired region, which we may see someday in another game. Does a game that launched in such a poorly performing and buggy state deserve DLC? Probably not, but I'll save that discussion. DLC is an inevitability for Scarlet and Violet, especially considering the success of the Sword and Shield expansion pass. Furthermore, the clues left in the game that I discussed in the Paradox Pokemon section are likely in this game to set up and be resolved in DLC. I'm not a fan of games doing this, leaving story threads unresolved, or leaving parts in a game specifically to set up DLC, and I'm of the opinion that DLC should be entirely optional and extra content. Regardless, there's a lot to speculate on with the clues we've been left with. Furthermore, the unexplained mysteries in Area Zero and the Scarlet and Violet books are ripe for DLC. I think in this DLC we will be able to travel to the supposedly ancient past or distant future, which if my theory is correct is actually an alternate dimension, pocket universe, or virtual reality. I think some plot-related reason will force us to take the time machine at the bottom of the crystal chamber to this time period or alternate reality. This area will probably be filled with wild terrestrial Pokemon, some brand new Pokemon, and some previously unseen Paradox Pokemon. I expect this area to look like an alternate or reskinned version of Area 0, probably with more set dressing like overgrown jungle for the ancient one and technological components for the future one. We will encounter that hexagon-covered disc-shaped Pokemon, which is the cause of the terrestrial phenomenon, and this will be the central narrative component of the DLC. Being a heavily terrestrial-focused expansion, I expect this area will include some kind of terrestrial cave, like the Dynamax cave in the Sword and Shield DLC. In addition to the terrestrial legendary, I think it will solve a lot of the unsolved mysteries in the Scarlet or Violet book, like the undamageable metal plaque found in Area 0, and the design on the floor of the Roaring Moon or Iron Valiant cave. Funnily enough, those symbols appear in this game's logo, which you can see on the title screen or on the game's box art. And finally, what I believe is this game's biggest unsolved mystery, Heath. I explained earlier that I believe he and his team are responsible for the creation of Paradox Pokemon, or at least the release of Paradox Pokemon into this world. And just look at this guy's face. Is this the trustworthy face of a good guy? I don't think so. He's a potential final boss hiding in this time period or alternate dimension. I think his Cyclizar was corrupted, or at least the template for Koraidon or Miraidon, as having his companion Pokemon Cyclizar is no coincidence. His appearance will give some much needed exposition and resolution to the Scarlet and Violet books, and I suspect he will be a tough final opponent, possibly using those Paradox versions of Suicune and Virizion. The encounter with him will reveal the truth behind the Paradox Pokemon, and will cap off the core theme of the game, the tension between the fiction and reality of myths and legends. Or perhaps I've just thought about it way more than Game Freak ever has, and we'll get something a bit more generic like the expansion pass in Sword and Shield. However, I would like to believe that those mysteries were put in the base game for a reason, and it would be a real shame if the DLC ignores them. I'm really curious to see what parts, if any, of my theory will play out in this inevitable expansion. Considering the Treasures of Ruin being from an eastern area and the eastern area of the map cut off, I think we will see a future game or DLC set in this region. With the Treasures of Ruin being Chinese inspired, I think this is hinting at a Chinese region in the Pokemon universe. This also lines up with the Pokemon Company's recent pandering to the Chinese market, with both simplified and traditional Chinese now being standard in games, as well as the release of games like Pokemon Unite, which is a MOBA game created with the involvement of Tencent, a Chinese multimedia conglomerate, and with MOBA being one of the most popular game genres in the Chinese market. Considering the Pokemon Company's desire to push their IP into China, it's logical that they take their pandering one step further with a game in a Chinese-inspired setting. While I'm not a fan of companies pandering to a specific market, I think China would be an inspired choice for a Pokemon game setting. With its diverse landscapes, culture, and architecture, it's fertile ground for a Pokemon region, and has the potential to be something we've never seen before. We've never seen an Asia-inspired region outside of the original game's Japan-based settings, and with Chinese culture being visually and historically distinct from Japanese culture, the prospect of a China-themed Pokemon setting is an exciting one. Will it be mainline or a Legend-style spin-off? And will it even happen at all, or am I just clutching at straws again? Who can say? But considering the speed they're churning out Pokemon games these days, I suspect we won't have to wait long to find out. If it's a mainline game, let's call it Pokemon Yin and Yang. That seems like an incredibly obvious name, doesn't it? You heard it here first, guys. Whatever game comes next, I sincerely hope it continues to experiment with the conventions and formula of the Pokemon series, just like Arceus and Scarlet and Violet have. I hope to see the idea of a party of trainers, like in the climax of Scarlet and Violet's story return, hopefully with voice acting this time. I think it's a safe bet that open world is the future of this franchise, and hopefully they'll sort out those horrible performance issues. I don't think we'll ever see mind-blowing graphics in a Pokemon game, but I also think we don't deserve a game that launches in such a broken state again. As a somewhat jaded Pokemon fan falling out of love with the series, 2022's games have lit that spark of excitement once more, and I have become more optimistic for this franchise's future. I truly can't wait to see what's next. Thanks for watching until the end. So what did you think of Scarlet and Violet's ending? And do you agree with my theories and predictions for DLC and Gen 10? What would you like to see in DLC or a future Pokemon game? Whatever you think, please leave a comment down below, and as always, I'll be replying to every one of them. And if you enjoyed this video, please drop a like for the algorithm. It helps get the video out there, and more importantly, it warms the heart of this aging and cynical Pokemon fan. And if you want to see more game reviews and discussion, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. So, thanks for listening to me ramble, and I'll see you next time.